Hello everybody, my name is Alex Gilbert and this is my final project for CS341, which I titled Object-Oriented Programming in a Game Dev Setting. We'll be using interfaces to create a state machine and also do some hit management stuff. So a little bit of background, the first object-oriented programming language was called Simula, which was used for creating simulations. And what we'll find generally is that object-oriented programming naturally fits in an environment where we want to mimic some kind of real-life event because, real life is made up of several objects. We have people, which can be objects, cars, trees, anything really can be an object. And these objects interact with each other. And that's why object-oriented programming, naturally fits an environment where we want to mimic something like that. And also that makes it perfect for creating video games, which is what we'll be looking at today. So the environment we'll be working in is a game engine titled Unity 5. It's a cross-platform game development tool, so what you create in Unity can run on a large array of devices, including mobile phones, web applications, the PS4, Xbox One, all kinds of things. It's easy to use once you get used to the editor, and most importantly, it allows us to code in C#, which, as you know, is a object-oriented programming language. Now, just a little bit about Unity before we move on. Here, what we're looking at is a screenshot of the Unity editor. And I have arrows pointing to several things in this scene. So this is the scene. And every object in this scene is a game object. Now, that's just how it works in Unity. Now, this player here, this little guy here ends up being our player. He's a game object. This car is a game object. This elephant here, which is, called the Helephant, which is hilarious, is a game object as well. Now I have this Helephant selected here, and I can look at its components. Now, game objects are completely defined by their components. The components define how they behave, how they act in the world, where they are even in the world. So this transform component here tells me where it is. This animator here animates it. We're not going to look too closely at that. We're going to have a rigid body which controls the physics, capsule collider which does collisions, and so on and so forth. Any action that this game object has comes from some component, and it's going to be creating components that we're going to be interested in, because we can create our own custom components using C#. So we can create our own behaviors for these objects. Here's a component that I created called player movement. So you see the C# code on the left and the component on the right. So what you're seeing on the right there is what you'd see in this window had I had the player selected. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about Unity, I'm going to switch over to my project. And I'm just going to play it so you can see what's going on. So I control this little guy. Now, all these models come from the Survival Horror template pack, but I did all the coding. So you can control this guy, you can look around, aim with your gun, and you can shoot. Great. What I want to have happen is I want things to happen when I shoot these objects. Now, I did a little bit with this car. When I shoot the car, it makes a noise and that smoke comes out. Cool. And also, I can hit this enemy. He makes a noise and he's going to follow me, chase me around. If I get too far, he loses hope and goes back. Alright, cool. So, moving on, going back to these slides. So to make all that work, I used several interfaces, and the three big ones here that you're seeing are iHittable, iKillable, and iEnemyState. iHittable and iKillable look like very simple interfaces, but you'll see just how powerful even very simple interfaces are in a game development setting. iEnemyState will be used when we want to create a state machine, and you see how nice that simplifies that. So how might we implement this very simple interface, iHittable? Well, one idea is that maybe we want these objects to make a noise when they're hit, like the car does. Well, what I can do is I can implement that iHittable thing with a component. So I can create a component called hitSound, implement iHittable, and when it gets hit, play some sound. So an audio clip is just a noise, a sound, and when it gets hit, I want it to play that noise. So that's pretty simple. But the question is, how does this hit function get called? Now, a game object can have several different iHittable components. So when a bullet intersects a game object, it gets thrown to this hit all function. And this variable hittables becomes a component array. Well, what kind of components am I going to get? Well, I'm going to get the components that are the type of hittable. So this hittables becomes all of the iHittable components of that game object. And if there aren't any, I just return false. But if there are, I'm going to go ahead and activate that hit function for each of them. And now that we kind of understand that, I want to jump back to Unity and show you how that works a little bit. Whoops. Okay, so if I jump to this car and I look at its components, you'll see that it does have this hit sound. And it's also got this hit clip. So the sound that it plays is this Zombunny herd sound. So when I play the game, I can shoot the car and it makes a noise. But when I shoot this thing, it doesn't do anything. But now that I have this interface, it's very easy to select this object, add the component hit sound, and maybe we want it to play player death. So this is the hit clip that it will play when it gets hit. Player death is just some random sound I picked. And now when I shoot that object, it makes that noise. And I have no idea why you would want it to play that noise, but there you go, it plays the noise. Cool, going back to our slides. Now what about the enemy? Well, it turns out that the enemy implements those same components. It has those same components, the hit sound and the hit particle. Hit particle I didn't talk about. It's just that smoke that comes up of the car. You know, maybe when I hit an object, I want it to release some kind of particle effect. And this is how easy, you know, once you have this interface set up, it's very easy to turn any object in the world into a hittable object. And that's the power of interfacing. Now that we kind of understand that, there's a little bit more that's going on that I didn't talk about. The enemy, if I go back a little bit, has a hit damage. So that just means when it gets hit, I want it to take some health away. And when the health hits 0, it'll activate its killable script, if you're wondering where that killable comes into play. Now, iEnemy. So now we're going to look at how we might want to create a finite state machine using interfaces. Now, finite state machines, if you've ever had to create one, you know that they might be a pain in the ass to implement. You know, you can create these giant nested for loops. Usually, you know, you can also create switch statements, but you know, it can very easily become a mess. But we're going to use interfaces to maybe simplify this process. Now, my enemy had 3 states. It can patrol, it can be alerted, and it can be aggroed. It should also have a dead state, but I think I may have gotten a little lazy there. So here I created an interface, iEnemy state, which has an update function, which is just going to get called every frame. So that's the logic that is going to play every frame of the game. It's got an init, so when this state becomes active, you know, maybe there's some logic that needs to occur. And also it controls when I want to change to a different state. And what does this do for me? This is the main enemy loop. State, all I have to do is call that state.update. So it's got some iEnemy state field called state, and I just have to call update, which is beautiful. There's no giant nested if statements, nothing. I just have to call state.update, and then on trigger enter, state.onTrigger enter. You know, maybe something different happens when I'm in a different state when I collide with something. All right, so let's go ahead and take one last look at our Unity project now that we understand how that works. And I'm just going to show off, you know, how the enemy works. So I can, as you can see now, the enemy is patrolling. I can get close to it, and and it's going to stop and look around, sniff around, and then I can come up to it, piss it off a little bit, and have it chase me around. And finally, I can shoot it enough to where it'll die. All right, and that's my project. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a new appreciation for object-oriented programming, and I thank you for watching.